So today we're going to be getting a little vulnerable, and we're going to be talking a little bit about a personal, story or journey that I have been on and still on, and all this like fun stuff. So don't worry, we're not going to need any tissues today. We're not going to cry. We're just going to figure out what it is we're doing, and hopefully use experiences that I've been through to try to help at least one person out there. Because I think there's so much pressure to really mold yourself into a certain person throughout our lives, and I think that really takes away from our uniqueness. It takes away from our authenticity. There ends up being some friction because if there is something that feels wrong, like there's probably something that's wrong. And it's so important for us to understand that we need to really know who it is that we are and what it is we're after. And I think the biggest thing is like at least get on the journey to understand who you are, because I think throughout life you're going to develop in certain ways. You're going to go through different experiences. Different things might happen to you, or maybe chemically happen to you internally, that ends up making you see life one perspective or in a different way, and then all of a sudden like everything switches and everything changes. And I think for people who say like they figured it out, like I think everyone's trying to figure it out, and I think there's a lot of great advice out there, and there's a lot of people who try to help, and it's one of the things that I do just based on my experiences. But understanding that like these are just my experiences, that you might relate to like only a small portion of it, or maybe not to anything out of it at all. And what we need to understand is that as long as we could continue to be students about our own personal lives, to understand what it is we can do and start to find patterns, then all of a sudden we have this ability to move forward. Because if somebody would say to you that you have to live this ideal way, this is an ideal marriage. Yes, I think we all picture like an ideal marriage, and it's like maybe in the movies, but I understand like people have different personalities. And it's so interesting because I find with my friends who are doctors, like their relationship with their spouses could be just as deep as they are with than they are with mine and my wife. Because like I'm home all day, I work I work all day, I see my wife whenever I go make a coffee or I want to go to eat lunch, whatever it is. And it doesn't mean that you can't have a certain relationship or you can't have a certain experience. And what we need to understand is that people are different. And what makes us unique is that we are all different. We all look very different unless you have an identical twin. But even so, I wrote about this in my book. Even two twins, right? Even twins who are identical, who look exactly the same, experience the same parents, and this and that. The fact that they sleep in different beds, the fact that they see things differently from a different angle, a different perspective, they go through different experiences, they're going to be totally different people. And that is totally fine. And what we have to realize is that when we're on this journey of trying to figure out who we are, and this self-discovery journey, we have to understand that it's okay to be different. It's okay to understand that, hey, you know what? There's more to life than what other people are expecting of me. And there's more that I need to be exploring. And if we can start to stay on that journey, that could be one of the most freeing breaths of fresh air, just because we understand that it's going to be confusing. We understand that at different stages, things might feel calm. There's going to be other times where it's going to be extremely rocky. And if we can start to realize that, then I think all of a sudden we could start to acknowledge the fact that we're different, accept it, and then all of a sudden we're not like forcing ourselves to be or act a certain way. And I think it happened to me. One of the big eye openers that happened to me is when I even started my coaching journey. You see, when I started my coaching journey, I was like uber pumped, like super excited. Everything in my life like finally made sense. Like the lines like totally lined up in terms of like what it is I wanted to do, how it is I wanted to do it. All my past experiences, like, oh my gosh, it makes so much sense why I did that and this. And I had that big aha moment. And then when I started to get into the practical aspects of coaching, I was like, okay, so like, what do I want to do? What type of coach do I want to be? And what ended up happening is that I started pressurizing myself, or started really pushing myself in one direction, but it really wasn't the direction that I was being most honest with myself. It wasn't like the glorious. I was doing more the glorious types of profession. So like in the coaching world, like you make big money when you can be, starting out. Let's talk about, we're not talking about like if you're like the top of the line, but when you're starting out, you make more money when like you're a business coach, because it's like a very easy ROI that you can say, hey, I'm going to help you make more money this year. Like, okay, great. I will be willing to spend less money to make more money. And when you get to like the whole like personal development, life coaching, health maybe is a little different. Maybe it's more like finances, just because like you can sort of see a result. There, relationship coaching, you could say falls in the same category as life coaching. So there ends up to be like, it's a little harder. You can't necessarily charge as much upfront. And maybe that's a limiting belief that I have. And maybe based on, my teaching, the way that I've taught, like that's not it. But based on my experiences, the people who are looking to charge for businesses end up making a lot more money. And what was interesting is that I felt like such an imposter throughout that beginning journey of my career. And to say that I was a business coach probably was, something that I didn't necessarily want to be doing. And what was cool about it though is that I ended up continuing on this journey and continuing to explore and recognize that I really like the personal development side of things. And my real belief, and I still believe this till this day, is like if we become better people, we become more successful, not just in our businesses, but in our relationships, in our health, in our own development of whatever area it is that we're looking to achieve. So for me, it wasn't necessarily I needed to switch my whole practice or my whole, like my whole coaching title, even though I've done that a bunch of times, to be extremely transparent. But it's more to understand that I just have to frame it differently. It's like, hey, I'm not here to be a business coach, and it's owning it. It's one of the things I say. It's like I'm not here to say X, Y, and Z. Like my job and my belief is that if we work on you becoming more confident, if we work on you becoming more disciplined, if we work on you becoming more decisive, we work on having less anxiety, more structured, more productive in terms of your strategy and in terms of like your day to day. It's not reasonable that you won't be more successful. And it's really owning that and acknowledging that. So I'm not coming with like my business, hat on saying, hey, I think we should be doing this for marketing and that for consulting and this and that. It's like, no, like that's totally different. And I think that's fine. And what we need to understand is that, and this is where like, for me, it's like a little hard to share, but like it's just how it was. It's like I wanted to be a business coach because it was so much more glorifying and I would make more money and I'd do all these things. But then by me doing that, I wasn't really being me. And what was interesting is that I could have seen success that way. I'm sure I could have figured it out, and maybe I would have went into that type of personality of becoming more of a business coach and whatnot. And what's ironic is also that like I literally work with business people. I'm just working on a different aspect. I'm not necessarily working on the business per se. I'm working on a different angle of it, which also affects the business. And yes, we do goal setting, which a lot of it has to do with our business. But I think it's just coming up from a different angle than maybe other business coaches. So if we could start to understand that, it really acknowledge where we are, acknowledge who we are, acknowledge what our interests are, then I really believe that that's going to start to really turn us into the people that we want to become. And we're going to be able to find our pool of other people, because what ends up happening is like, whether it's socially as we grow up or as we get older and we're in different communities or different schools or whatever it is that we're going to be in, we're surrounded by other people and we want to fit in. And, the way you fit in is like you be like everybody else. So you wear the same things they wear, you talk the same way. And it makes sense. And I think there's like a big aspect of that to society, but also understanding that by you just being like everybody else. And this is where I love the people who are different, know they're different, but then yet they still, well, let's say wear the same dress as everybody else. Because deep down, not even deep down, like on the surface, they know like this is just a dress. This doesn't really change anything of mine, but I can still be me. I can still become somebody. I'm still different. I still like my weird things that I like to do. And, I have certain hobbies that like maybe nobody else in this community does have. And I think if we could start to acknowledge that, to say like, hey, it's not about like, I need to be like different and I need to, I need to dye my hair green because like I need to like just represent myself. And maybe there's like a sense to that, but it's like, no, I'm going to be able to do this because, and even sort of conform in a way, but understanding that it's all superficial. I think that's totally fine. Maybe I don't know let me know if you think I'm like off on that, but that's like my belief. As of now, that is my belief, that it's okay to dress a certain way like everybody else if you know that like it's only a dress and it doesn't really mean anything of you. And I think so many times people focus so much on the exterior, so much on where you send your kids to school, and so much on where you, I don't know, any other social gatherings or what programs you're associated with and whatnot. And if we can start to say, who am I? Like, what is it that I want? Then all of a sudden we start to get to a place where we can become somebody great. We have this ability to really step into the person that we want to become. And it's interesting because I think growing up, and it starts when we grow up, but I think it happens even when we're adults, is that we have certain people's expectations about us, about how our life should be. You growing up, it's probably our parents. They're like, oh, I have to be a doctor because like my dad expects me to be a doctor, or I need to go to become a lawyer because everybody on my mom's side is a lawyer, and therefore I have to be a lawyer. I mean, there's certain expectations that are set for us based on other people's perception about us, but how things should be. And what we have to understand is like we have to do what's us. We have to do what's right for us. And sometimes those people have really big insight into us, like who we are and how we work and whatnot. But a lot of times I find people are just doing things for the sake of somebody else. I know this one guy who's whose parents were so pro or so were so pushy that that he go to law school, that he literally went to law school, got a diploma, gave it to his parents, and said, "I'm not practicing law," and like walked out. And like it was like such like a mic drop because like he literally did it for them. Like it was annoying and like whatever, but he had to prove them. Like you want me to get a law degree? I'll get a law degree, but guess what? I'm not doing anything with it. And it's so interesting because I find so many times people don't even know what it is that they want. And if we could just start to explore, just explore for ourselves what it is that we want. What are our preferences? You know, growing up, I used to be a very big I don't know type of guy, and I'm like, you know, young adult clients. Every time I ask them a question, I don't know, I don't know. I'm like, you don't know because you never thought about it. Could you just think about it for a second? And I tell the story about how when I was one time on a date with a girl, and she asked me what my passions were, and I had no idea what my passions were. And you know, as a high school kid, I was like, "Oh, basketball. I like basketball." And then she's like, "No, like, what are you passionate about?" And I had no idea. And it got me thinking afterwards, like, "Oh my gosh, like, what are my passions? Like, what do I believe is meaningful in my own personal life?" And it sort of was like a wake up call because I'm like, I'm dating to get married, and want to have a family, and I don't even like know what I'm passionate about. I don't even know the direction that I want to go, and I like doing certain things, but am I passionate about them? Maybe, maybe not. Like, what are my hobbies that I like to do? And if we could start to really just clarify for our own self what those things are, and we can not be so affected by other people's expectations and understand what are other people's expectations versus like what are our own personal expectations, our own personal perceptions about how things should work. And it's one of the interesting things that you find. One of the things I love talking to young adults about is like money, because depending on how the kid grew up, they have different perceptions of money, and I think adults do. But it's like either money's bad or money's good, you know. And what we have to try to figure out is like how can we just come into the conversation with like no other expectation, just like okay, like what is good, like what is bad, like let's just have an open conversation and see what we can do, because so many times we like somebody has like a negative view towards money. What ends up happening is that they end up self-sabotaging themselves, and they end up suffering so much, I believe, because they're just not financially making it. They're just making wrong decisions. And it doesn't mean you have to be a jerk. And it doesn't mean that you can't be really, really wealthy and have an amazing relationship with your family and, you know, other priorities that are going on. You just have to educate yourself on doing it. And I think so many people are so scared of the education aspect of it regarding finance itself. And that's why I'm a big proponent of like really looking into like your financial education and just get yourself used to some of the ideas, compounding interest, like basic stuff that like we should all know how investing works, how do stocks work. Not saying you have to delve into it like crazy, but understand, okay, there should be a level that I should be able to understand. And if we can start to do that, then all of a sudden we'll be able to start to just figure out who it is that we really are. And based on our experiences, we're all going to be very different. You know, a lot of times we're you know talking about like the different schools we go to, like we have certain peer pressures, and I think as we get older and as we might not be surrounded by those friends anymore, or maybe we move out of town, and then all of a sudden we end up really seeing who we really truly are. And I think that is something that could be so powerful to us. And so many times I think people end up holding themselves back just because of the people around them, because the other people like, oh, they might say this or they might say that or they might think that or whatever it might be, they end up holding themselves back. And I think we all need to have that ability to understand, okay, what's going on here? Who am I really? What do I really want to be doing? Is the career that I have great or is it not great? Maybe it's good. Am I making enough money? Even if like you're covering your expenses, like maybe I want to be making more money. Are my relationships great? I know everyone tells me like this is considered a great relationship. Am I really happy? I don't know. And if we could start to ask ourselves these questions, we could really start to get on that path. So what can you do practically? Practically, we always talking about practical stuff. So what we can do? So number one is like get your journal out. Get your journal out. If you don't have a journal, go on Amazon, buy one for like $8. You get really cool colors. I got a green one this year. And what we can start to do is we can start to really get clarity in terms of like who it is that we are. And like ask yourself in specific areas of your life. Like what are your beliefs? What do you really think? And if we can start to just get clarity on that stuff and ask yourself and explore, like, what is it that you like to do? What do you not like to do? Sometimes by not liking to do something, that is very telling in terms of like what it is you can be doing. And if we can do that and if we can be open to our nuances, like I believe everybody has like a weird side. And if you could just be like, acknowledge your weird side. So I don't know whether I don't want to call anybody out, but what's my weird side? Now, I know how to juggle and I know how to do magic tricks. Okay. So like, that's like something that like maybe most people don't know how to do, or maybe they do, or maybe they only knew how to do as a kid. But like I was an adult and I learned, I learned that stuff, and it's like okay, like that's my thing. And like I think it's like embracing the weirdness. I think that will allow you to accept yourself. And I was actually recently looking at I was admired by what a teacher. There's a teacher in my kid's school who I was like so admired by because I'm like he was probably in like the nerdier group growing up, but like he embraced it so much that like he's like one of the coolest people. He's like this cool confidence to him, and I'm like, good for him. And I was so jealous in a way because I'm like, if I could just acknowledge who I am and just be like, this is who I am. You like me, great. If you don't like me, that's also great. Then all of a sudden we could start to just be who we are. And I think so many people don't think about it like that. They don't really get themselves to ask themselves the question. They don't think about it. They're not just on top of it. So ask yourself, what is it that you like to do? What is it that you want to be doing? How is it that you can get yourself to really just become the person that you want to become? Then all of a sudden things really start to switch and we allow ourselves to really experience different areas of our life that we will be able to really step into. We'll start to be able to set that target, because if we're doing something right now that we know in the next 5 years is not going to be beneficial to where we want to be, then we have to recognize that something's got to change and we really have to change it. So acknowledging that, I think, is going to be huge in terms of like the direction that we're going in. And once we could do that, then all of a sudden things start to change a different way. All right. Let me know what your thoughts are, questions, trying to figure this out as well as for myself. So feel free to let me know your ideas. I'd love to be able to talk about it possibly on an upcoming podcast. Make sure to take a look at all the great stuff we have down below, all the offers. We got some really cool free stuff. And take a look at my book if you are interested on that on Amazon, Lost and Then Found. Till next time.